Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 p.m. ET, and that means you have found us here at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. As always, we are here at 4 o'clock on Tuesdays to bring you the greatest new novels in crime fiction and some fabulous authors who we want you to meet. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 novels of suspense, including number 14, The House Guest, which you will hear about here way too much when the time comes. But today I am so thrilled and honored to introduce to you the fabulous Scott Shepard, who don't listen to me, Scott, because I want to tell this group that you are the coolest guy, the most amazing guy in the world. And this is Scott's newest book, Should I Fall, the second in the Austin Grant series. And it is a riveting cat and mouse mystery. It comes out July 5th. So you all are so lucky that you'll be able to hear about it first. And we will put up a link for you to order your very own copy of this not to be missed mystery. Let me tell you, don't take my word for it necessarily when you can, but let me tell you what Michael Carita said about this novel. He said, a retired Scotland Yard inspector races to prove the innocence of a falsely accused fugitive, his daughter's fiancé, in this whodunit from a marvelous storyteller. So, Scott, I mean, Michael Carita is the king of storytellers. What was it like to hear that praise from him?
I met Michael like 10, 15 years ago when he was doing his own detective series. And I just loved his work right then. And we became friends. And then he was one of the people who encouraged me to actually start writing novels and I really respect him so much. And I think he's such a wonderful writer. So I was thrilled to get that response from him.
I mean, it's amazing because it's not amazing, but it's fabulous because the idea of storyteller, which you are so good at, is what we all strive for, right?
I guess. I mean, I think, I feel like structure is, when I tell people on the television shows I work, I always say structure is freedom. And and that's always been really easy for me. I think it's all these murder mysteries, the thousands I've read and doing the shows. So to me, I think you got to just keep the story going. And once you have that, then it's all downhill from there, I hope.
Well, I mean, I'm so fascinated by what you just said, and I have a bunch of administrative stuff that you all know that I'm going to say. But what do you mean by structure is freedom? What do you mean by that?
Um, I feel like is if you know and to me, I always feel like if you know where you start and you know where you're going to end, then I can kind of usually work out the rest. It's sort of like if you're going to, Harlan Coben and I used to talk about this all the time because we became friends and did a project together, and he's certainly very successful. And it was interesting to find out we approached it the same way. He sort of said, like, his example is great, so I'll use his example, which is his example was if I'm going to go from New Jersey to San Francisco, I know I'm going to start in New Jersey, I'm going to end up in San Francisco. So now, how do you get there? And you can either go you could take Highway 80 straight across, you could fly out of Newark into San Francisco, or you could take a bobsled up through Canada to the North Pole and a boat to Hawaii and a boat to Hawaii. So once you know where you're going to start and where you end, the interesting way is to get that. My version of it has always been, it's like a maze. And to me, I always sort of say with a maze, here's the start, here's the end. And I'm not one of these people who starts a maze like this. What I do is I start at the start and I start at the end, and you work your way towards each other. And that to me is structure. And so the idea is, I know I'm going to start here, I'm going to end here. Now let me find the most interesting way. Instead of going this way straight to each other, I'll go this way and I'll go this way because I'll find interesting things along the way. So that's what I kind of feel like structure is freedom, meaning I know the beginning and I usually know the end. Though in this particular book, I did not know the end.
Well, let's get to that in a minute because my brain is still twisted in whether you could really start an actual maze from both ends, because how would you know you would meet in the middle? I mean, you might not. But anyway, we can talk about
Do a
that.
demonstration on an iPad sometime with like a maze or something. Yes, we can.
I'm going to try. Oh no, in about 45 minutes, you trust me, I'm definitely going to try that. But I do see from the standpoint of writing a novel how writing toward something or some incarnation or some kind of something can keep you on the path.
Right.
Knowing that you have to have beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
And that kind of structure as well.
You know, another writer, Robert, what's his name? Carson, the man who wrote the Lyndon Johnson books, right?
Robert Caro.
Carrot, right. I remember an interview with him. He said something that I thought was really interesting. He said he goes to sleep at night knowing at least what the first sentence he's going to write the next day is. And I kind of feel the same way. It's like I want to know at least where I'm starting, and I kind of want to know where I want to end the next day, and then I'll figure out the rest. I mean, if I have that much, I think having read thousands of mysteries and plotted thousands of or hundreds of hours of television and watched all this stuff, I can sort of figure, my way from there, but I'm not ready to do it until at least I have that much.
And I love the idea of having a first line for every day, because that takes away the terror of this blank screen of like chapter 24. Oh my
Right.
golly, I have no idea.
Right.
Let me just take a moment to welcome you all here today. I see the comments are pouring in already. Pamela is saying, I do amaze this way too. You do? Okay. I see we have some partners in Maze working here today. And here's Pamela, here's Shannon, all kinds of people who are joining us today to hear about Should I Fall by the fabulous Scott Shepherd. And because you are here, you know that this is A Mighty Blaze, which was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the powerhouse team of Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum to keep us together as a reading and writing community, keep us meeting new authors and learning about new books. And that is certainly what we are doing here today. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to read you, Scott. I'm going to read everyone your bio, because I want people to know exactly who they're hearing today, because it is quite astonishing and there's more to it than this, you all. But listen to this. Scott Shepherd was born in New York City, but moved to California about the time he started crawling. Growing up in Los Angeles, he saw plenty of movies and Dodger games before heading up north to get his BA in English at Stanford University. And that's fine. And that sounds like what people's lives can be. It's not that surprising. But Scott is a veteran writer, producer, showrunner with years of experience running network series, having overseen hundreds of hours of television. I don't mean watching television, I mean overseeing television. His extensive list of credits includes some of the most popular hit series from the past 3 decades: The Equalizer, Miami Vice, Quantum Leap, one of my favorite shows of all time, True Calling, and The Dead Zone, to name just a few. He has also collaborated with a number of best-selling novelists on various television projects, including Stephen King, Harlan Coben, and Karen Slaughter. But wait, there's more. I'm just going to read you a little bit more. He is also currently teaching television writing in the graduate program of University of Texas at Austin. While he isn't trying to make a television deadline, you'll find Scott traveling with his wife, Holly, somewhere, a whole nother story, usually to a big sporting event or whatever Bruce Springsteen concert is playing. How many Bruce Springsteen concerts have you been to, Scott?
I've been to over 300. And speaking of Bruce, I'll just say last night, he actually announced that he's going on tour next year for the first time in 6 years with the band. So I told my wife, I said to Holly, I said, this might be when we have to leave the house for the pandemic. So, when he plays outside, we'll go see him play,
If Bruce can do it, you can go see him.
Exactly. I figure, yeah, if him and the band can do it, I'll figure it out.
Can I ask you, what was this Bruce song that you heard that just changed your life?
Incident on 57th Street, which was on the second album on the Wild and the Innocent. It's just, I heard that and I said, here's this great writer. What Bruce said, what he aspired to be was he wanted to write like Bob Dylan. He wanted to sing like Roy Orbison, and he wanted to sound like Phil Spector's live, wall of sound. And I just thought he was just this kind of poet between the Dylan and all that. So, and I saw him then subsequently after that in 1975, at the Roxy on the Born to Run tour. And it was like literally life-changing, So he was one of the couple reasons I wanted to be a writer,
Because he's such a good storyteller, because he's so profoundly affecting.
And in fact, there's little shout outs to him in all my books, in the 4 books I've had. Descending Sun, my first book, that title actually comes from a Bruce Springsteen song, which was from Because the Night, which is Take Me Now as the Sun Descends, but my son was SON. And the other little thing is that I dedicate every one of my books to my wife, Holly. and um, the underneath the dedication is always some version of a title of a Springsteen song. So like the first one was to Holly, she's the one. Like, and that's like this, the new one I think is to Holly, as always for you. So, Bruce gets second billing, but he's there. Yeah.
This is the stuff. This is the reason why you all watch Crime Time,
Well, I
right?
actually, oh, and you know what? This title's from a Bruce, is sort of a version of a Bruce Springsteen song.
Your whole life is sort of a version of a Bruce Springsteen
Yeah,
song.
well, yeah,
Exciting and changeable and poetic and storytelling and a wall of words, which we all are so attracted to. And I didn't even finish the bio, you all,
oh,
because listen to this, and this is my final thing. And then we'll talk about the fabulous Should I Fall, I promise, because you're here for the book, but you're also here for Scott. And you can see why I wanted him to be on the show today. He is also has a role, upcoming show, not a role, but a showrunner role on the upcoming show this fall called Monarch, which you might have heard of, starring Trace Atkins and Susan Sarandon, who also you might have heard of. So you are a Renaissance man. That is certainly true, Scott. Welcome, welcome, welcome to
thank you for
Crime
having
Time. When is Monarch going to be on?
in September on Fox. We don't know what day, but they're.
Oh, you froze a little bit, Scott. It's sort of a country music. Here we come. Here he goes
Yeah.
back.
Oh, sorry.
You
No,
froze.
yeah, it's on. Yeah, on in the fall.
This is the suspense, you all, because I think Scott is freezing just a little bit. It's a country music extravaganza, sort of the Dallas of country music, and I cannot wait to see it. We'll see if we get Scott back. Is he frozen for you all as well? Can you tell me in the comments? Is Scott frozen for you? If he is, we might have to have him go out and come back in again. I'm looking in the chat. Margaret behind the scenes says, yes, he is frozen. Margaret, if you'll tell Scott to go out and come in again. And we will talk a little bit while we're waiting about Should I Fall. Should I Fall is the second in the Inspector Austin Grant series. Austin Grant is, in this book, has retired from Scotland Yard and is beginning a new life. His daughter, who lives in New York, is now engaged to a man who was also is a New York police officer. And at the beginning of the novel, she comes back to his apartment and finds his ex-wife on the floor who has been murdered. And her husband, the police officer, is of course one of the suspects in this case. And it is a fast-paced cat and mouse murder mystery you can imagine. So in comes Inspector Grant, coming in from London to help his daughter discover what happened to the ex-wife of his daughter's fiance. So that is, it's a riveting, as I said, riveting cat and mouse story that takes place all across the world. So it's not only a cat and mouse thriller, but it is a wonderful detective chase scene. And I'm wondering, you saw all of the books in Scott's room, and Scott is not only a writer of mysteries, but also a writer of television shows and a producer of television shows. And as you heard, has worked on so many TV shows. It's just quite amazing. Did you hear that list? Miami Vice and The Equalizer and Quantum Leap. And as we wait for Scott to come back on the screen, Mighty Blaze is saying, I love the mashup of NYPD and Scotland Yard police force backgrounds. Yeah, and it's interesting. We'll talk about that because one of the things that's interesting, and I do want to ask Scott about that when he comes back, is that when you have a law enforcement officer who, for some reason, is suspected of a crime and then who runs, the first thing that someone who you would think is guilty would do, you have to think about that he knows all of the things about law enforcement. He knows what his law enforcement pals and colleagues would do and what they would look for and what they expect people to do. And then to have the father of his fiance also have been in law enforcement, to be a retired inspector from Scotland Yard, brings another element into the game. So you have the relationship between father and daughter, the protective father, the grieving daughter who isn't quite sure what actually happened. So you have the father-daughter relationship. You also have the relationship, the professional relationship of the father with the police officer. There should be colleagues in law enforcement. And yet they may have similar interests and they may have different interests, but what they share is a knowledge of how crime works, how criminals work, and how law enforcement works. And that is the essence of Should I Fall? And we will see if we can get Scott back. If we can't, what we'll do is Sherry is saying you're great at ad-libbing. Hank, tell me a little bit about what you all think about Scotland Yard books, about law enforcement books, and whether those kinds of police procedural detective novels are the kinds of books you love to read. Do you like police procedurals better than you like romantic suspense, rather than you like psychological suspense? Tell me a little bit about what you all are reading these days. And let me see if I can look in the comments. Pamela is saying, adding to my TBR pile. Shannon says, sounds like a must read. Sherry saying, love the Bruce connection in all his books. You know, when I first met Scott and we talked about Bruce Springsteen, and I said, you know, oh, he loves Bruce, and that's great. And who doesn't love Bruce Springsteen? I remember the concerts that I have been to, and they are, you know, from that first note, and you recognize the song, and you think, okay, this is going to be unbelievable. But 300 concerts is quite an astonishing devotion to an author. And you saw the books behind Scott. He has, I wanted him to tell you about this, not me, so I don't want to ruin the story, but he has a marvelous, amazing Hollywood background that you cannot believe. And I'm going to save that and have him tell you whether we have to have him come back later. I'm going to check my chat and see maybe that we need to restart. So here's what we're going to do. Do not move. Oh, here comes Scott. You did it. Yay, Scott. You are such, and I don't use this word lightly, you are such a rock star to persevere and get your connection back. I was almost getting ready we were talking about Scotland Yard books while you were gone. Let me make sure you're muted, Scott. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry. The internet went out completely. I don't know why. I'm so sorry.
The internet went out completely, and that will happen. And we just riffed through it. And we were talking about books that star people from Scotland Yard. Margaret in the back room is saying, blame PG&E. Mighty Blaze is asking, I'm curious what U.S. audiences understand about Scotland Yard not being from Scotland. And all. Do you have any idea of the derivation of that?
Me? I have no idea.
Well, I have no idea. That's just such a great question. Any of you put that in the comments, and the first person who puts where Scotland Yard came from in the comments will win a special prize, because I think I have 2 copies of Should I Fall? And so we will give one in the Wheel of Fun at the end of the show if you leave a comment or a question, if you tell us, and you'll get a second copy if you put where Scotland Yard came from. Mighty Blaze, you don't count. I'm not. Mighty Blaze says Scotland Yard is the street where London HQ, the Mets of Police, is located. Yeah, okay, but there's got to be more than that. There's got to be more than that. Anyway, Scott, back to you. This book starts in Tiffany, which is the most New York thing there could be, and also not quite random for you. Talk to us a little bit about why you chose Tiffany and why Tiffany is a special place for you.
Oh, well, there are a couple things. Yes, Tiffany's, I guess, just as my father was a producer in amongst other things, and my dad produced Breakfast at Tiffany's. So that's
your dad produced Breakfast at Tiffany's. I want to make sure your dad produced Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I know that everybody who is watching has seen. So go ahead about that.
Well, so no, I mean, there is that, and so yeah, that's why I put it there, and it actually starts with her, Rachel, who's one of the main characters, going to pick up wedding rings that have wedding inscriptions in the book from Tiffany's. And the reason it starts from there is because many, many years ago, that's where we picked up our wedding rings with the exact same inscriptions to me and my wife that are for Frankel and Rachel. I mean, there's a lot of, one of the things I've said about the first book, The Last Commandment, and now this book is, Austin Grant, around 60 is like sort of my perspective on things now. And John and Rachel, who are together and about to be married in the second book, which was so strange. I didn't talk. Now we have to talk about that with this book because that's where it starts. But when I was talking about the first book last year, that was kind of a thing I couldn't talk about because they didn't get together until 2/3 of the way through the book. And it was sort of a surprise. So, but I've always kind of sort of said that Holly and I got together in New York, our 35th wedding anniversary this August. And so there's a lot of parallels.
I mean, your wife is named Holly.
Yeah, I know
How can that possibly be?
Yeah, that was strange too. My wife's name Holly, and yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
No, no, no. Holly go. I will say is, and look, when we grew up, we had a dog. The first dog we ever had was a dog named Holly because we got it for Christmas, and my dad had just made the movie, and had made Breakfast at Tiffany's, and Audrey was a family friend for years and years and years, and so we named the dog Holly. So when I brought my lovely wife to be home from New York where we met, and my dad first met my wife, the first thing he said, he goes, "Oh, we used to have a dog named Holly." Okay.
Welcome to the family. Oh, okay. I mean, this, I told you all at the beginning of the show that Scott has so many wonderful stories. And I'm not sure I've ever talked to anyone who dropped into casual conversation that Audrey Hepburn was a dear family friend. And he has a million stories like this. But let's talk about Should I Fall,
Yeah.
which is the second in the Austin Grant series. Tell us quickly about the first one, because I do think you can read them separately. They stand alone gorgeously.
Well, that was kind of the intention. Yeah. I mean, what's really been nice, we've gotten a couple of really nice reviews already from people who really, really liked the new book. And they were both unaware that until they were kind of reading it, going, "Oh, there was one before it." And they both said completely you did not need to read the first one. But both people had gone back before they reviewed it because they liked the second one to read the first one.
So tell us quickly your three main characters.
There's three main characters. Well, the first one, The Last Commandment, takes place 6 months prior to this. And what that is basically is that Austin Grant is retiring from the Scotland Yard. He's got 3 weeks to go in December. It's around Christmas time, and there's a series of murders that take place that take place according to the Ten Commandments. And it drives him to, the first three are in London, but the one that starts the book it takes him to New York, where he ends up hooking up with a young New York cop, John Frankel, who he works side by side to investigate these series of killings. He's also estranged from his daughter, Rachel, he has not really talked to in the year since his beloved wife died. And what the book's really about is, yes, there's a really kind of cool, twisty murder mystery to solve, but it's also about his reconciliation with his daughter Rachel, and Rachel in the course of this falls in love with the young cop, and that's kind of what the first book's about. So this book takes place 6 months later, and it's on the eve of Rachel and Frankel about to get married at the place that Matt got married to his wife 40 years before, and it takes off from there.
And I have to say that while you were battling PG&E, I told a little bit about what happened at the beginning of the novel when what Rachel comes to find, and how that sets the story into motion. So you tell that in your words, because I tried it in mine.
Well, I mean, so she's picking up her wedding rings, and she's got a gift to give, cufflinks that she's going to give to John, and she's leaving the next day. It's about 10 days before the wedding that's going to take place in London, and she's going to join her father over there. And so she figures she'll go into his apartment and leave the cufflinks in his bag. So when he packs to leave a week later and join her, he will find her wedding present to him. So she unlocks the door, and lo and behold, dead on the floor, shot to death in his locked apartment, is Frankel's ex-wife, Julia. And that's how the book starts.
And that's just a perfect beginning for a murder mystery. I love the idea, and we were talking about this again while you were gone a little bit, about how when obviously John will be a suspect, and he is on the run, and that is so suspicious. And when you have a law enforcement officer who is accused of something and on the run, it's interesting because you know that he knows what his colleagues who are now looking for him will know, and what they expect. And he may know how to evade it. So the idea of this big international chase with so much knowledge, including Inspector Grant coming from Scotland Yard to help his daughter, is very twisty and perplexing and wonderful.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, it was one of those things that I knew that's what I wanted, uh, that's what I wanted to start with, was him kind of maybe on the run. And the question is for Rachel and her father to go, is this man I'm marrying the man of my dreams? Or is he something else? And then the idea was that here is father and daughter who are now reconciled and are very close again. And that on the eve of that wedding, where a parent and child get to spend a few days together, the last time before they take their spouse, they get to spend some time together. And one of the things that happens in this book just is that Julia, the dead ex-wife, is from Hawaii, has been living and run away with somebody. It's very early on. It's not giving anything away. It's in the first couple pages that she left Frankel, a number of years, like 3 or 4 years before, ran off with the superintendent in their building, and they moved to Hawaii. And so what happens is that one part of the book is Austin Grant and Rachel going to Hawaii to look into what was going on with Julia before she ended up dead in Frankel's apartment. And what was interesting was when I wrote the first book, I originally had them running off to the Caribbean, where I've never been. And right before we turned in we started to publish the manuscript, for some reason, I hadn't any idea what the second book was going to be. I said, I'm going to have them run to Hawaii, because my wife and I, we've gone to the big island of Hawaii a lot. It's where we've been at least 25 times, and I've always wanted to write about it. And then when I came up with this idea, I said, the only other thing I knew about this book besides the opening was that I wanted Grant and Rachel to go to Hawaii for like 100 pages.
For 100 pages.
Where I can literally deal with everything I've always wanted to write about. And it was also really about, here's two people going away together before she's about to get married, father and daughter, except they're investigating a murder at the same time.
Well, this is one of the things that's so incredibly special and wonderful, and how you handle this so beautifully in the book, is the combination of a really good murder mystery, and also a wonderful character study of the relationships between father and daughter, between potential bride and potential groom, between law enforcement professionals as well. All of those things are balanced. How do you see the murder plot and the relationship character plot weaving together, and why is that so important?
Well, I knew I wanted to be emotional. I mean, that's all I really care about at the end of the day, because I think structure, because of like what we talked about earlier, it's pretty simple to me, and I've read a lot, and I kind of know a beginning, middle, and end. So why do I want to revisit these characters? Why do I want to care about them? And so I wanted it to be about that. And so strangely enough, when I was writing this book, I didn't know I didn't know who killed Julia. I didn't know why she died. I didn't know any of that. I figured it out as I went along. And I just kept knowing if it was working on all the emotional cylinders, which I believe it does, in ways that hopefully are unexpected, in terms of getting to know more about my main three characters, in particular, in this case, John and Rachel. It would work. And to me, as I was plodding along with it and figuring it out as I went along, I kept saying, this seems to be working that way. And when I got to the end, I said, yeah, this is the only way I could have written this.
Well, we just put up Margaret just put up your Library Journal starred review, which must have been marvelous to see. And one of the things that I think is so compelling about your book, is one of the things that writing teachers always ask is, why do I care? Why do I care? Why do I care about these people? And we deeply care about all three of them.
Mm-hmm.
How did those three characters evolve?
It's funny. So they evolved from, I've talked about this, in our own chats, is that the Last Commandment was an idea that I've had in my head for 30 years. And like everything else, because of television and some other novels and everything, everything sort of like on the back burner, and I'll get to it eventually because I'm just too busy all the time. And originally it was going to be the idea of, what the Last Commandment was going to be. Back then it was going to be like Sean Connery at 60, Robert De Niro in his 30s, and then by the time I got to writing the book a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I'd never even been to London. At the time I thought of this idea. I've been 6 or 7 times since and love it. And so the other two stars of the first book are New York and London. And in this one, it's kind of New York and Hawaii, and Maine, where I've been to once, which I liked, and I wrote about that. So what ended up happening is that the characters ended up sort of just becoming more important than the twists and turns of the mysteries. Like I knew that the original idea I had was a Scotland Yard cop and a brash New York cop end up like getting in each other's faces, having to solve a murder mystery. And then I can tell you the moment where things changed when I was writing the first book, there's a scene in the first book where they're having Grant and Frankel are having, are in a coffee shop below the apartment building that Holly and I lived in 35 years ago. And they're sitting there, and and Grant notices that it just came to me writing it that Frankel's wearing a wedding ring. And he tells this story, he goes, like, you're married? He goes, no. And he tells the story of his wife, Julia, leaving him. And then he goes, why are you still wearing a wedding ring? And he talks about how he's never been able to bring himself to take it off because not that he was hoping for her, and that he kept waiting for the right woman to come along. And it so informed me who Frankel was, that he was much more than that brash, New
That he
York.
had emotions and heart and hope
Right.
and
And he
love
was,
and
and somebody
vulnerability.
worthy for Rachel to fall in love with. And so when I got to this book, because their romance was so quick and they fell in love with each other in the course of 2 to 3 weeks, and now they're getting married 6 months later, this book is about to say, are they meant for each other? And I like to think that they probably are.
Well, we hope so, because we love Rachel so much and we
Yeah.
respect John so much and we adore Austin Grant, who, everybody wishes he were their father. There's
Right.
there's no,
Yeah.
there's no question. There's no question about that. I mean, we're running out of time, but the books behind you, all
Yeah.
of those millions and millions of stacked up books behind you, are they crime fiction? Are they mysteries? How did you get into crime fiction world?
They're 90% of them are mysteries and thrillers and detective novels. There's some horror in here and a little bit of sci-fi, but it's mostly that. You know, uh, when I was a kid, my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, used to bring me Hardy Boy books when I was a kid, and she, would bring me two. And I always remember about the Hardy Boys. You'd read the book, I gobbled up, and you get to the last page, and it would say, um, Joe and Frank are suddenly next week are going to be, in the house with the cabin on the cliff. And it was always like telling you there was another one coming behind it. So that's what started it. I mean, it was the idea of continuing series of mysteries to see characters you're familiar with. So most of these people are like, 20, 30 books in of using the same characters. And I love that stuff. It's kind of like it made it natural that I ended up getting sidetracked going into series television. I always wanted to write books, but in series television, these are characters you bring in every week that you bring in to your home. I mean, plots are plots, right? You want to make them cool, but I think people watch it every week because you want to see a character. They're going to react in a certain situation, and they become part of your family. So that's where it sort of came from.
And it's fun too because you're also solving the mystery along with the person that you love and
Right.
rooting for that person to win. And that's exactly what happens in your books, including the brand new coming up on July 5th, Should I Fall, which brings us to Sherry's question is, will there be more books in the series?
Yeah, I hope so. Uh, I was starting a third one right before I ended up getting sidetracked by Monarch, which was like, and now what I'm doing, I have this idea that what I'm going to do right now, I'm just starting and I kind of came with this interesting idea because I like people who do this and it sort of works. I'm going to kind of do this standalone thriller, but in the standalone thriller, Frankel and Rachel are in it.
Oh, I love that. I mean, you can read these as standalones as well. So
Right.
we
And
were
the
talking
idea is
about
it's kind of going to be a bridge between books 2 and 3 of this. And it's a female driven domestic sort of thriller that I'm really excited about. And then the other day, because it takes place in New York, and I kind of went, you know what? What's kind of cool is like the cop should be Frankel because there was something in the past a couple of years and now present, and I can set it like a 2 months into their marriage, which is going to then be right between that and the next book. So that's what I'm doing.
The way your mind works, and I know everybody is hearing this, the way your mind works is just astonishing. And I can't wait to
Yeah.
see what you come up with. Can we take 2 seconds, you all, to talk a little bit about Monarch? I mean, I know this is highly anticipated, this show.
Yeah.
And now you have this big audience that I want you to tell a little bit about what this show is about to be.
Yeah, it's a fun show. It's a country. It's a little bit of everything. It's a country western, country music soap opera. So lots of music. It's a soap opera. It's also got some really cool mystery and murder in it. And it's with Susan Sarandon and Trace Atkins, or the King and Country, King and Queen of country music. Trace Atkins is a very country singer for real, and they have three kids, two daughters. One is played by Anna Friel, who's sort of, kind of.
Oh no, now we're not going to hear what Anna Friel is. You'll have to fill in the blank for yourself. Let's go right to let's draw for the winner of Should I Fall? Because I think, Scott, we're losing you a little bit. So let's just
Back now.
Yep. That we'll have you back. We'll have you back for the next book, and we'll make sure that PG&E does its stuff with the internet for you. I do not want people to miss this book, and we're going to draw your winners, and we're going to spin the wheel right now. If PG&E will let us do that. Look at that. Look at all these people. I love it. And the winner is this is Anissa Joy Armstrong, who is such a wonderful fan of Crime Time, and we are so pleased. And Anissa is a wonderful reader and a wonderful reviewer, so we cannot wait to get this into her hands. Scott, I'm going to stop because I know this must be so frustrating to you to have.
Yeah, I'm sorry that ended up happening like that, but
it's all fine, because all I care about is that this audience knows about your marvelous book, Should I Fall? It's a terrific, fast-paced cat and mouse mystery with three soon-to-be beloved characters. As soon as you read it, you will love them too. This is absolutely not to be missed. Should I Fall by Scott Shepherd. So stick around for 1 second, Scott, while I introduce, I'm looking for the book, who's coming here next week. We're here every Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. And next Tuesday, we have for you Chris Holm and Child Zero, which is an incredibly chilling, timely, Michael Crichton-esque novel which you will want to read with the lights on. So come next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET to hear Chris Holm talk about his riveting Child Zero, which on the front, Lee Child says, intense, propulsive, and provocative. And that isn't the half of it. Child Zero by Chris Holm, a completely different kind of book than the charming mystery with wonderful relationships, Should I Fall by Scott Shepherd. Congratulations on this book, Scott. Thank you for persevering with us today.
Sorry about it's Spectrum out here. We can blame them.
Spectrum. Okay, bad Spectrum. Good book. And don't you all miss this. Thank you all for being here today. And remember, as I always say, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.